Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here. Today, what I want to talk about is some very deep, heart-connected subjects, and it has to do with abandonment and the influence of abandonment on our mental, emotional, and relationship health. It is a very key root issue that we need to understand, and the relationship of shame and how shame impacts how we process, how we relate. And then something I am going to bring out called shame attacks. And a lot of the things here have been stuff I want to talk about for a while. Some of this will take some time to process through and understand. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you may want to flip over and go to the video version of this, because this will help you to see, as I've written a bunch of things on this board, I'm going to talk through some of these areas here to understand what's at the root system. And I'm going to show you too why sometimes it's so challenging to navigate heart healing in our life, because the issues of abandonment and shame have such a combustion. They affect us so strongly. So I put a list of many different areas up here at the top that impact our mental, emotional health. I put words like OCD, anxiety up here. Within those frameworks are what I call performance-driven lifestyle, performance-driven Christianity, performance-driven living. We try to live out of feeling loved and accepted out of what we do. There's a lot of striving involved. We're constantly trying and putting all this effort to be loved, to belong. And we get into patterns like perfectionism, which is the just right mentality. Just right, but never enough. And I've mentioned that perfectionists have a lot of shame underneath their perfectionistic work. Perfectionism becomes the mask in how they present themselves to the world and how they live their life. Do just right, do just right, do just right. But underneath there's a lot of shame in how they see themselves. And of course we can branch off into people-pleasing patterns, because it's easier to help other people all the time, ignore ourselves, because when we look at ourselves, we see ourselves through shame. We often carry burdens we shouldn't carry. We can get into codependency. We can get into patterns of bonding with people in dysfunctional ways. We carry everybody else's stuff. We don't know how to say no. A lot of this can contribute to areas like obsessive compulsive, to anxiety, and there's plenty of other areas too, as far as depression, moods, addictions, and plenty of the other struggles that we have in our heart healing journey. But what's important to understand is this is kind of the top layer, and we start to move down into the surface. If shame is a part of the equation, then what happens is it dilutes everything in how we see down into the root system. And shame is that sense of, I am unloved, I am bad. Looks at things through such a condemning lens. Shame is a work of condemnation, because fear comes in and we're afraid of punishment. We're afraid of something happening to us. We're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of being guilt-ridden and what that does. Shame can be something we wear. I've done a whole series on shame, and so I'm going to get more into that word in just a second. But what shame has a partnership with is it has a partnership with abandonment. And I would say, if I was to get to the root issue, the root core issue of all the roads and struggles and all battles, and I wrote this here on the board, all brokenness leads to abandonment. What makes healing very challenging is this issue of abandonment, because we were all made to be loved, to be in connection, to belong, to be affirmed, to be validated. It's built within the framework of who we are. And so we are meant to get that from God. We're meant to also get that relationally as we interact with each other. And those of us that have had these brokenness issues and our mental health struggles, there is a shame perspective that partners with abandonment and inflames this. Shame takes abandonment and makes it this pulsating nerve that if you touch it, it explodes. And so abandonment says this. These are very, very profound statements of brokenness. I will be alone. That's pretty much what abandonment's saying. I will be alone because you will leave me or God will leave me. So there's this shame, abandonment, fear process where we see our brokenness through such a lens of contempt, condemnation, self-hatred. We look at it with disgust. Not only do we look at our battles with disgust, we look at ourselves with disgust. So then abandonment kicks in and says, they see your brokenness and they will leave you. God sees your brokenness and will leave you. So there becomes a cycle we live in. Follow me. The shame connects to abandonment. I will be alone. You will leave me. God will leave me. And then I'm going to die. It's kind of the process that we go through. Think of your tough moments, your tough days. Think of where you struggle with your thoughts, your emotions. You have spiraling moments. What's usually being triggered is shame, abandonment, fear. Yeah, I'm going to die, right? It leads to like, I'm going to be alone and I'm going to die. You're going to leave me and God's going to leave me and I'm going to die. So it creates this upheaval within us. In addition, what shame does is it teaches you to abandon yourself. This is why I talk about God's work in restoring you to yourself. Because in the midst of brokenness, what you do is you like step away from yourself. You don't realize it. Sometimes in psychology, they can call this disassociation, and there's a spectrum of that, severe, intense kind of, and then there's just that like mild checking out or just not wanting to deal. Or, just kind of getting lost in your thoughts or just always getting distracted into maybe another world or another, just dreamland or daydreaming. Not all of, daydreaming, that stuff is bad. I'm just saying that there's a spectrum where we disconnect from ourselves, right? Because if I have disgust towards you, I feed that disgust. What's my tendency going to be? I'm going to back away. What many of us don't realize is you're backing away from yourself constantly. So you become divided in yourself, and like the Bible says, a house divided can't stand. So it becomes this broken chasm between how you relate to yourself. You become very double-minded. You're constantly critiquing yourself along the way. So it's hard to take steps forward, right? So you're feeling the shame, abandonment, I'm going to die. Shame, abandonment, you're going to leave me, God's going to leave me, I'm going to die. So that fear gets inflamed, and the shame inflames this abandonment to the point that we can develop what's called shame attacks. Now, people can use this word in certain ways. What I want to bring out to you is, you've heard of panic attacks, I'm sure, right? You have a panic attack, it's anxiety that goes intensely, it's debilitating. And it's a rush that hits you, right? Can be debilitating, can cause you to freeze, can cause you to manifest a lot of different things. Well, have you thought about a shame attack? And as I began to take this word and just let my heart discover and let God help me to realize that so many of us come under shame attacks because there are certain areas of abandonment that get triggered in moments we don't realize it. You're talking with friends, you're going about your day, and you just kind of get hit with a level of shame. And I wrote down here some of the things that can happen and take place. One of them is emotional spinning, right? I talk a lot about spinning. You start spinning, you start ruminating, you start spiraling. Your emotions feel like you're going. Sometimes my wife and I use the term dipping. Did you dip? Are you dipping? I dip, you dip, we dip. Are you dipping? Many people from this can go right up into OCD. They're perfectionistic just right, so they go into that mode. They become obsessive compulsive about their thoughts, get control in, or maybe they become obsessive compulsive about you. Others go into anxiety. Oh my goodness, I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm having a panic attack. And certainly that could be a part of it too. But are you having a shame attack? I found as I look back at my journey, I'd have these moments where I would have, it's almost like it would take over. The shame attack would take over. And a lot of it was this abandonment issue, which is tied to what I call the rejection mindset. Okay, I'll just put RM there to talk about the rejection mindset. That's what abandonment's pointing to. And it would hit at the wound of abandonment. One of my wounds is the wound of, you're ignoring me, you don't see me, you're not paying attention. So it'd be that, or it'd be a heavy shame perspective. You do see me, you're analyzing me, and you're judging me because you're seeing my vulnerability. So I have these two areas just screaming at me. And there are moments in my journey where that no one's listening, they're not paying attention. It's been at family gatherings, it's been relationally. I saw this as a pattern even relating to my wife and relating to people. A trigger would get hit of just, they're not paying attention, they're not here. And it's like I could feel myself emotionally just dropping out. I just wanted to get out of there, just wanted to leave. And I've had to really do business with a rejection mindset. I remember days going for a walk where I had to learn, I am not going to separate from myself. I'm going to embrace myself lovingly because I'm spinning, and it's okay that I'm spinning, and I'm going to nurture myself down. I'm going to renounce this lie of rejection and abandonment that says I will be left alone, that God will leave me, because our brokenness tells us, even though it's a lie, our brokenness attaches to these lies, that we're going to be left alone. Someone's going to leave us alone, or God's going to leave us alone. And I remember times sitting there and like, I know what it's like to feel that, like that pull of the rug out from under you kind of moment. And it reveals I've been struggling. It reveals I've had woundedness for years. It's arising in this moment. And so then a couple things happen as I just center myself in God's love and reconnect back to myself. Hey, I'm not going to do this thing of escaping. I'm not going to check out. I'm not going to react to this. I'm going to let this get loved. And I found myself learning how to recover. There's moments too where the perfectionistic tendencies of my life that I've been shedding off more and more and more. There'll be a moment in interaction where I can see someone sees a goofy part of my journey. They see a vulnerable place. Sometimes they say something, they don't mean to be rude, don't mean to be, but it hits a trigger of shame. I'm having a shame attack. They see my brokenness, and what's going to happen? I'm going to be left alone. They're going to leave me. They're going to reject me, and I'm going to die. You know, it's like all like, I'm going to be left alone. I'm going to die. I'm going to be left alone. I'm going to die. I'm chuckling, but in that moment, it's like it hits me hard. It's like I feel it in my chest. I feel that here. So it can cause an emotional spiral. It causes mood issues. Like our mood can shift, and maybe it affects something like a bipolar, where someone has those manic super highs, or maybe like a medium high manic episodes that goes for days and days and days, and then they drop down, right? Because this abandonment thing follows us. And it links up with the shame and fear, a rejection mindset that says you're done. When they see this about you, you're done. You're not loved. You're not safe. It can even lead to quicker mood shifts, like what's brought out in borderline personality disorder. And one of the big major themes of someone with borderline is when their mood shifts, it's like it's a momentary, it's hour by hour the shifts can happen. And what's screaming is this abandonment, and there's like a shame attack rising up. They go into survival mode. So then maybe they get distorted and they start getting super needy, or they start accusing, or they get easily offended. They kick up a fight. They're erratic, and there's a sense of chaos that erupts in them because they're under a shame attack. They're in survival mode, because if you don't feel loved and connect to belonging, this is where the enemy seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, because it just takes us out of our relational calibration. We were meant to be loved. We were meant to be connected in love. Man, I feel this for my journey. I feel this for so many people that I interact with and help. So there's bipolar, there's borderline personality disorder. There's just some mental health markers just to point out. There's this aspect of despair. I call despair like the emotional lever that gets pulled and like a trap door opens up. And you just free fall. That kind of feeling, that helplessness that happens, right? So it affects us in that way. And sometimes it helped me to realize this is what's happening. This is what's going on. I don't need to compulsively try to fix it. I don't need to react to this. I'm going to let God love me through this ride. And part of letting God love me through is I'm not going to feed this. I'm aware of it. And many of us just need to be aware. What's happening in this moment is really about my history. It's not even about the person in front of me. It's about my history. It's not even really about the moment. The moment symbolizes something in my history, which leads us to this one, which is a trauma reaction. Many times we have this trauma reaction that hits you and it just takes your mood out, and it's a shame attack. Now, what you're seeing may be similar to something in your history. And that's usually when we have, I call it flashbacking. I don't even know if that's a word, but it sounds good. Many times when people are having anxiety and they're all having a panic attack, they're having a flashback. Something in the present moment resembles something in your history. So it engages your fight or flight, which has been conditioned to avoid that danger from the history, and this looks like it. So your fight or flight is how you were made to run from a bear if it jumped out of the woods. You gear up and you get extra energy to utilize. It's only for a moment, then you have to calm back down again. Well, many of us in trauma and neglect and our brokenness, it never got turned off. You're in fight or flight often. And so in the bear scenario, something that happened to you is a bear scenario. And in the present moment, something resembles the bear. So your fight or flight goes bear alert, even though this is not a bear, even though this may not be a danger, it hits you. And it causes this flashbacking kind of spiral. This can even affect your physiology in all kinds of ways. It could impact your blood sugar, can have a sudden dip. It can create a cortisol release. It can hit your cardiovascular system, respiratory, your breathing. You could feel like the room is getting small. You could feel this closing in, like a claustrophobic kind of feeling. What's happening in this moment are these two things here. You're regressing to a childhood stage in your life. When I say regressing, I don't mean you're going backwards, like you're losing ground. Because a lot of times when we're having a shame attack, it's an invitation, we're going deeper. So don't take this as, oh, I'm going backwards. Everybody beat themselves up, they're going backwards. No. The regression, I mean, is you're referencing historically a time in your childhood that wasn't loved, that wasn't built in safety, that wasn't nurtured. It could be traumatic experiences. It could be flat out abandonment. And abandonment comes in a number of forms. Abandonment comes in the form of someone's there, but they're not tending to you. Abandonment could be someone actually leaving, physically leaving, a father leaving the home. That is one of the plagues that we're dealing with culturally, is fatherlessness, fathers not being there, or fathers being there but not being there, not tending to the needs. And mothers then out of all that's going on there, and then her own brokenness, she's not able to nurture. So there's a lot of emotional abandonment in the form of neglect. And neglect is a recipe for all this to happen. You don't have to have a significant PTSD label or a heavy trauma that you point back to. It doesn't have to be there. It's simply neglect. A lot of our perfectionists have been massively neglected. And many can amp it up where they become OCD in their journey. And that's their control mechanism, to try to stay protected, to keep all this controlled. But it just keeps happening and happening. You're dealing with this, is what you're seeing. But this down here is what's happening. So you have physiological symptoms. You feel it's that child sense where you're going back to a moment in time. And this is where I believe God uses this and can use this in your life to help you look at that time, that moment. Because many times you can go in the moment, go, what does this feel like? Don't judge it. Don't yell at a shame attack. Don't judge it. Just love. Be loving and compassionate. It's okay. What does this represent? And it brings you back to a time in history where I can think of moments where I look at myself as a child and I go, where was everybody? Oh my, where was everybody? And I feel that aloneness, and instead of directing myself in that memory to beat up that child, to yell at it, because that would be rude, that'd be harsh, I let my thoughts be the thoughts of God, my Father, to be loving towards that. And it allows me to have some healing tears, some healing processing of what I needed in that time, and start to engage reparenting of myself. Because really, to heal from this stuff, you have to learn to be your own parent, to allow God to heal some of the dysfunctional even downright sinful parenting that you were under. So you see how this abandonment issue runs so deep, and shame partners with it? And remember, most of our battles, if I was to sit down with anyone, 99.99% of what we're battling, there's some form of rejection, root, abandonment that's there. And when shame grabs a hold of that, it creates these spirals. So in a shame attack, perfectionists, they can rise up with anger, right? Lash back because they're being threatened in how they appear and how they look. If you're a performer, if you're a striver, if you're a pleaser, you're going to compulsively try to make them happy, make them happy, make them happy, because this thing is ticking. This person could leave me. I'm making them upset. So you become a pleaser. You don't want them to be mad at you. We diffuse. I'll take this. You take on the burdens, right? We react. We go, instead of going deeper and let God heal, we go back to these areas and let them be survival mechanisms. I'm encouraging you to stop and notice and go, what's going on here? I've had to learn this the hard way. I go, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to let my legs do the walking and the Holy Spirit do the talking. Father, you love me. Help me to work through this, because I know there's healing available for me. So there's the physiological symptoms. There's the child moment that we need some healing, and the feeling of small. That's what shame does. Makes you feel very small. Shame makes you play small, right? I'm going to step out just enough, but not too much, because it's scary out there, right? Because this thing just keeps pulsating. And shame makes abandonment grow to be this monster. You're going to be left alone. I find that when I face this, I'm like, first of all, this whole thing's a lie. God will never leave me nor forsake me. And you know what? People, they have their flaws. They have their stuff. But I'm actually projecting things that's not allowing me to relate in a healthier way. And most of all, I don't need to leave myself. And that's a healing word for many of you. Many of us feel small, so we go to small. Then we feel helpless. We don't know what to do. So then we go into this place of self-pity, where now we spiral, we loathe in ourselves. And if you notice, there's a lot within mental health of the manifestation of self-pity. The feeling sorry for ourselves, the no one cares, I can't do this. It moves into victim thinking, which victim thinking says, I have no options, I have no one and no options. And so then we spiral unproductively. We feed the shame monster. We start hating on ourselves, loathing on ourselves. And it's like beating yourself with a baseball bat. And I'll sit in sessions with people where I have to bring out, you have a baseball bat in your hand and you're constantly hitting yourself with it. And then going, why am I still struggling? It's like, stop the baseball bat so then we can tend to the wound, because shame is clouding this. We got to get shame so the abandonment can start being healed. And so in that pity, we can get into neediness too, feeling sorry for ourselves. I found historically, growing up, I had a hard time identifying my needs and expressing them in a way that people could help me. So I use self-pity because that could get people's attention. If I was really super sad. So then it made me relationally needy. And you go overboard, you do too much. And you're putting it on too much. And we put a demand for others, right? And this hurts mental health, because that demand we put on other people can create some of these mood issues. It hurts relationship. It doesn't bring healthy bonds to our life. Most of all, what I've learned in this, and what I'm sharing with you today, is to help me to make sense of some deeper issues of my life. It helped me to realize this stuff needs to be grieved so that it doesn't take hold. I got to grieve through these areas of pain in my life. And I've got to learn to be a compassionate witness of grace versus an enemy to myself. So I said a lot here. I really encourage many of you to go through this a few times and take notes of what I've shared here. I'll even take a picture of this and post it so that if you want to just take the graphic and zoom in on your phone or look at it on your computer screen, you can kind of examine it in your own processing. and listen through each of these things that I brought up, because we all have areas of abandonment, areas of shame we got to work through. And shame will want you to cover up, because any moment of vulnerability, we spiral in all these areas. God's love comes in when the vulnerable areas are there and there's no shame. His light is a light of love. So I pray that God our Father will help you in this. And I pray in the name of the Lord Jesus that God will show His grace to you, His kindness to you, and His healing love, because you're safe. But we're learning to be safe in His love, learning to be safe in His nurture, in His grace, and in His care. If this is a blessing to you, please let me know. If it rang some illumination in your journey, let me know, because it would bring great delight if it landed in your hearts in a fruitful way. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you next time. If you want to support these videos, go to markdejesus.com and you can click on the donate button. You can also join our email newsletter. You can get a free ebook by joining, and you'll get updates on future resources and broadcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to click the notifications so that you can be alerted for any lives and any other new resources that are coming out in video. I'll see you all next time. God bless.